So here I am, I finished my 47 centimeters, and this is what my sleeve looks like. Once you're finished your 47 centimeters, or your 50, or 52, or your 53 centimeters, depending on the length that you're making, we are going to shape the top of the sleeve so that it fits the shoulder when we sew it together. Okay, so I'm going to show you how to do that right now. So here we are on the next step. We're going to shape the sleeve tops, okay? So right now, if you're small, you should have 71 stitches, a medium 75, a large 83, an extra large 87, and an extra extra large 91 stitches on your sleeve right now, okay? And what we're going to do, the first step is we're going to cast off a number of stitches in the pattern at the beginning of the next 2 rows. So let's say this is me, and this is row 1. I'm going to cast off, if you're a small, 5, a medium 5, a large 5 stitches. If you're an extra large and an extra extra large, you're going to cast off 6 stitches. Okay? So because I'm a small, I'm going to be casting off 5 stitches in the pattern at the beginning of the next 2 rows. So at the beginning of this row, I'm going to cast off 5 stitches. Then I'm going to work my sleeve all the way to the end in the pattern like normal. Then once I'm done that, I'm going to be working on row 2, where I'm going to, at the beginning, cast off 5 stitches and then work in the pattern all the way to the end of row 2. Okay, so at this point now, once I've done these 2 rows, I will have 61 stitches. Okay. If you're a medium, you'll have 65, a large you'll have 73, an extra large 75, and an extra extra large 79 stitches remaining once you're done these next 2 rows. Okay, so that's part 1. That's part 1. So for part 2, what we're going to do is work a certain number of rows, and we're going to decrease 1 stitch at each end of every row. Okay, so if you're a small, medium, large, you're going to work 6 rows. If you're a large or an extra large, you're going to work a total of 8 rows. Okay, so this is part 2. So here I am. I've done my first row, my second row, and my third row. So my third row is the beginning of part 2. I'm just going to label it as number 1 again. Okay, so we don't get too confused. So for part 2, the first row, we're going to work a decrease at each end of every row. So we're going to start with a decrease, okay? Then we're going to work our pattern all the way to the end, and we're going to decrease at the end. So we're going to decrease right at the beginning when we start, 1 decrease, and then we're going to do 1 decrease right at the end. And then we're going to work our pattern in the middle. So that's the first row of my 6 that I'm doing, right? So the second row, because we're decreasing at every row, I'm going to begin with a decrease at the beginning, work my pattern like normal all the way to the end, and then I'm going to decrease the last stitch. Okay? The third, same thing, decrease at the beginning, decrease at the end, work your pattern in the middle. The fourth row, same thing, decrease at the beginning, decrease at the end. And the fifth row, decrease at the beginning, decrease at the end, and in the sixth row, decrease at the beginning, decrease at the end. Okay? So that's for me. I'm doing 6 because I'm a small. You'll do 6 if you're a small, medium, large, and an extra large and an extra extra large. You'll do a total of 8 rows. Okay? So I did my total of 6 rows. And I decreased 1 at the beginning, 1 at the end for each row. Okay? So at this point, you will have 49 if you're a small, 53, 61, 59, or 63 stitches remaining, depending on your size, small, medium, large, extra extra large. Okay? Now, let's work on part 3. So that was part 2. So for part 3, once you've done all of that, you're going to work a number of rows and you're going to decrease 1 stitch at each end of the next and following alternate rows. So that means that we're going to do the same thing as step 2. We're going to decrease at the beginning, at the end, and at the end of the row, but instead of doing it at every single row, we are going to do it every other row. Okay? So if you are a small, you're going to do it for a total of 18 rows. If you're a medium, a total of 22, a large, 22, an extra large, a total of 20, and an extra large, a total of 20 rows. Okay, so this is part 3. All right, so we're going to decrease 1 stitch at each end of the next and following alternate row. So what that means is as soon as we finished, for example, this one, the last row here, which in this case was for me row 6, technically row 7, or we're going to reset it at row 1 again, but technically it's row 7. We're going to begin directly with a decrease. Okay, so this row here, row 7, right, aka section part 3, row 1, so it's the same thing. We're going to start with a decrease. Okay, decrease. Then we're going to work in the pattern like normal to the end, and then the final stitch here we're going to do a decrease. Now then we get to the row 2, and row 2, because we are decreasing on every other row, we are not going to decrease on this row. So for row 2 we're going to work in the pattern all the way across to the end. Row 3 we're going to decrease. Okay, decrease 1 at the beginning, work your pattern, decrease 1 at the end. Okay, row 4 we are not going to decrease, but row 5 we will decrease. 1 at the beginning, work your pattern all the way to the end, the final stitch we're going to do a second decrease. Okay, so that's what we're going to do. So for me, I'm going to do that for a total of 18 rows. Okay, so we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, etc., all the way up to 18. Right? For medium, the large, 22, extra large, extra large, a total of 20. Okay? So when I'm done that, I should have a total of 31. If I'm a small, 31 if I'm a medium, 39 if I'm a large, 39 if I'm an extra large, and 43 stitches if I'm an extra large. Okay, remaining on my sleeve. Now part 4, we are going to work a number of rows and we're going to decrease 1 stitch at each end of every row. So part 4 is similar to part 2. And now we're going to decrease every single row instead of every other row now. Okay? So if you're a small, you're going to work 8 rows. If you're a medium, you're going to work 8 rows. If you're a large, 12, an extra large, 12, and an extra large, 14 rows. A total of 8, 8, 12, 12, or 14 rows depending on your size. So for me, because I'm a small, I'm going to be working a total of 8 rows. And I'm going to decrease 1 stitch at each end of every row. Okay, so once I've done my 18 rows, I'm going to be on part 4, where the first row I'm going to start with a decrease. Then I'm going to work my pattern all the way to the end, and then the final stitch at the end I'm going to do a decrease. Okay, so decrease at the beginning, decrease at the end. Number 2. The second row, we're going to decrease at the beginning, decrease at the end, and work our pattern in between. Row 3, we're going to decrease at the beginning, work our pattern all the way to the end, and decrease at the end. Okay? And then row 4, same thing, decrease 1 at the beginning, decrease 1 at the end, and work your pattern in the middle. And row 5, decrease 1 at the beginning, work your pattern in the middle, and then decrease 1 right as you get to the end again. Okay, so I'm gonna do that for a total of 8 rows. Medium 8, large 12, extra large 12, or an extra large 14 rows. Okay, so I'm gonna do that for me because I'm a small till 6, 7, 8 for a total of 8 rows. Okay, So at that point, I should have 15 stitches remaining. And that should be for everybody. Regardless of your size, you will have 15 stitches remaining. Okay, if you're small, medium, large, extra large, extra, extra large, you'll have 15 stitches left. Okay, and finally, the part 5, what we're going to do is cast off 3 stitches in the pattern at the beginning of the next 2 rows. Okay, so it's similar to the first step over here. At the beginning of the next 2 rows, we're going to cast off 3 stitches. So right over the first one, we casted off 5 at the beginning when we started our shaping the sleeve top. The final part here, part 5, instead of 5 casting off, we're going to cast off 3. Okay, so row 1, we're going to begin by casting off 3. Then we're going to work in the pattern all the way to the end. Then for row 2, we're going to begin by casting off 3. Then we're going to work in the pattern all the way to the end. At which point you should have 9 stitches remaining. Okay? Then 1, 2, then the last row, which I guess we'll call it row 3, the final row, we will just cast off all 9 stitches. So everything here we're going to cast off. Okay, cast that off. And then you're done shaping the sleeve. Okay, so that's what we're going to do to shape the sleeves. Once you finish that, you're going to start a new sleeve. Okay, so we finished one sleeve.